Welcome to ShortVIEW. ShortVIEW is a new video format which we developed here at Corporate Governance at LSE because we want to bring you some different opinions from policymakers, practitioners and of course academics on corporate governance. My name is Tom Kirchmaier of Corporate Governance and I welcome with me here Hans Hirt. He's Director at Hermes Investment Management and also Fellow of Corporate Governance. So today we talk about Jamie Dimon. So he was big in the news yesterday complaining about shareholders that were lazy. What is this all about?
Yeah, it's a very interesting comment from Jamie Dimon. So what was reported in the press is basically that he said at a shareholder conference, shareholders are lazy, and I'm paraphrasing here, to rely on proxy advisors. And I think he raises a really good point in taking the discussion away from the proxy advisors and talking about the investors who are the clients of proxy advisors and using the research. So basically what he was suggesting that shareholders shouldn't just rely fully on proxy advisors and buying their research and following their recommendation at annual general meetings.
So what do you think? Is he right or wrong? Are shareholders lazy? Are they relying too much on these proxy advisors, or do they have a real valuable role to play here?
I think it's very difficult for a portfolio investor, if he invested in 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 companies, which is very often the case, to really pick up every company and to look at every single resolution of every single meeting all around the world during the annual general meeting. But what shareholders should have is to write down their own policy and then working with one of the proxy advisors to implement this, and also having a progress in place to really pick out the important resolution and the big meetings where they have significant investments. And that's something where I think I would agree with his assessment. That's not, unfortunately, not the case at many investors.
Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, they seem to have power. So much power that Jamie Dimon feels threatened by them.
They have, I think he's right, they have power because many shareholders just follow them without doing their own research on key decisions, and that's to a degree I think that's justified. Institutional investors also need to watch their costs. I mean, outsourcing is very common. It wouldn't be sensitive to look at every resolution all around the world and do your own research. So buying in some research as a first cut, as a first source of information to form voting decisions, and then defining an internal approach to make sure that someone actually looks at the important meetings and the important resolution. I think he has a very good point, and that's really what stewardship codes all around the world are trying to ensure, that institutional investors get more involved in the corporate governance of companies and not just outsource something like the voting.
Because, you know, listening to both of you, so they have an important role to play. They might be very powerful because they monopolize opinion, but then shareholders are lazy because then they don't seem to go the extra mile to say, actually, what the advisor says might be good, but I have a different opinion. So
certainly what we are doing, trying to do at Hermes, is to have engagement with companies. So we know the companies well, and we take decisions on a case-by-case basis. So for example, at BMW, the German car manufacturer, we voted in favor for the CEO becoming chairman of the company. So that's something that's very controversial from a corporate governance perspective, that we assessed the company's specific situation. We assessed the track record of the individual concerned, looked at the overall composition of the supervisory board, and then made a decision on the basis of the circumstance of this specific case and decided to support this person, whereas the proxy advisor said this is against corporate governance principle. We recommend investors to vote against this. But that's only possible if you have if you know the company well and if you know the situation you're considering.
So proxy advisors are always a bit lazy at times. But, you know, the bigger issue is obviously shareholder rights. Do we give too much power to the shareholders, too little powers? You know, you listen to many people and they seem to be split in the middle. You know, some say actually shareholder power leads to short-termism. Others say actually the crisis happened because we didn't have enough power. What's your view on that?
I think there are some fundamental rights we believe shareholders should have, and in many jurisdictions we have these general rights that you can vote for board candidates, that you can also in certain circumstances nominate people for board position. That happens very rarely, and I think the interesting case this season in the US was a flurry of proxy access shareholder proposals. So some of the...
Tell us a bit more about this. It's actually interesting.
It is very interesting, very important development that in the US you don't have a basic shareholder rights. That means that a shareholder holding a certain percentage of the company can nominate someone to run for the board. So what needs to happen in the US is that companies need to have that in their articles of association. So what happened this voting season in particular, that some of the big US pension funds filed resolution to put that in place, so to ensure that investors holding a certain percentage can nominate people for election to the board.
It almost feels a bit like the US is moving to a UK type model where shareholders have a lot of power. In fact, here you can call an extra general meeting with, I think, 25% of the vote. But then the economy is not running fundamentally better here either than in the US. Do shareholder rights matter?
Very interesting question, particularly against the backdrop of shareholder activism in the US. So there was the argument proxy access only benefits hedge funds and short-term activists. But the model that is now developing means that you can only nominate candidates for board election if you have held the shares for 3 years, if you have 3% in the companies, and even then you can only nominate 25% of the board. So there is a compromise solution really between short-term interest and also safeguarding the fundamental right which we believe shareholders should have if they hold a certain percentage of shares to nominate people to the board. I think it's difficult to say one specific shareholder right affects the performance of companies or entire sectors or economies to that extent, but it is important to have that shareholders have the opportunity in certain circumstances to put people on the board, and that's what's happening in the US now.
Well, it sounds like a very sensible solution somewhere in the middle, and maybe here the debate in the UK could go a little bit towards the American model, taking a little bit away from the extreme shareholder rights you have here. But that's obviously just my opinion. Thank you very much, Hans.
Thank you.